An Ohio woman, her mother, and her boyfriend will spend the next several decades in prison after police uncovered a murder plot that left a father of three dead. And authorities say they used animal tranquilizer to do it. We're updating you with everything you need to know about the shocking case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner, filling in for Jesse Weber. In an Ohio federal courtroom this week, Amanda Hovanec didn't have much to say about the murder of her ex-husband, Timothy Hovanec. She told the court during her sentencing that his death, quote, came down to her being selfish. According to prosecutors, Hovanec and her husband initiated divorce proceedings and had 3 children together and were battling each other over custody. Amanda lived in Wapakoneta, Ohio, and Timothy had moved to Virginia. He worked for the U.S. State Department as a researcher, but in April of 2022, he was back in Ohio for a court hearing. According to Timothy, his estranged wife had been denying him visitation, even though the judge had ordered it. When he got to Ohio, a judge ordered that he be given visitation over the next 2 days, and that he would be the residential parent of custody and legal custodian of the 3 children for the summer. Prosecutors say Timothy spent time with his kids at the Best Western Hotel swimming in the pool. But when he returned the girls to Amanda's home at the end of the visit, she put her sinister and murderous plan into motion. And here's what else we know. Timothy traveled all over the world for work, and his family lived with him in different countries. They lived in Germany for a few years, then moved to South Africa. That's where his wife met Anthony Thedorou. The two started a relationship, and when the family moved back to the States, Hovanec initiated the divorce proceedings, and that's when the custody feud started. After his visit with his children, Timothy dropped the girls off at the home of Anita, Amanda Hovanec's mother. They were living together at the time. When he didn't return to the hotel and all of his items were left behind, employees contacted the police. They in turn contacted the FBI because they were concerned that electronic equipment in Timothy's room could have sensitive information on it because of Timothy's job as a security engineering officer with the State Department. Investigators tracked Timothy's cell phone and credit card use and discovered that the last place he was seen was at the home Hovanec shared with her mother. Timothy had a dashboard camera in his car that was running during the drop-off and was a huge piece of evidence in this case. In the complaint filed against Hovanec, her mom, and her South African boyfriend, Timothy is referred to as TH. And here's what it said about what happened next. Amanda walked toward the driver's side of the vehicle and began to interact with the 3 children. Simultaneously, Green waited by the door located next to the garage of the residence, waiting to take the children into the house. Amanda can be heard telling the children, "I have a surprise for you inside," and the children entered the residence, followed by Green. Seconds later, TH said, "What the heck are you doing? Did you just assault me?" TH followed that by saying, "Get away from me, get off me." TH and Amanda entered the screen of the video from the passenger side of the vehicle. Amanda is pulling on his hand and shirt as TH tries to use his cell phone. Amanda then aggressively wrestles for his phone, eventually knocking it out of his hand onto the ground. Amanda then pulls on TH's back and neck and gets him to the ground. She held him around the neck, not choking him until his body went limp. Amanda immediately picked up his cell phone and took off what appears to be an Apple Watch and turns off the car, stopping the video as TH laid unconscious and unresponsive in the driveway. Police interviewed Hovanec, and she eventually confessed to the murder. It turns out Thedorou had shipped Hovanec a drug called etomorphine, also known as M99. It's an incredibly powerful opioid, so powerful in fact that it's not even prescribed to humans. M99 is usually used to tranquilize large animals like elephants. Experts say it's the preferred tranquilizer for really large animals because of how quickly it works. It's said to be 1,000 times more potent than morphine. Thedorou later told investigators that he got the M99 from a veterinarian in South Africa. Hovanec admitted to police that she drove Timothy's car to another location and abandoned it. She also admitted to throwing away his license plate along with his phone and watch and the syringe and the drug vial. Thedorou, who by this time had flown to the United States, helped Hovanec get rid of the evidence while Timothy's body lay wrapped in a plastic garbage bag in the garage. The complaint reads, prior to killing TH, Amanda told her mother, Green, that she was going to kill him. After Amanda killed TH, she also informed her mother that it had to be done. Amanda and Thedorou loaded TH's body into the back of Amanda's Honda Pilot. Shortly thereafter, Green drove Amanda and Thedorou to where they buried the body. Amanda and Thedorou used shovels from Green's home to bury the body. Amanda said that Green dropped them off and later returned to pick up her and Thedorou up at a predetermined time. Amanda picked the burial site because it was near farmland her grandfather used to own. Thedorou took investigators to the burial site and directed them to a shallow grave. Timothy was later exhumed and positively identified. When police confronted Hovanec's mother, Anita Green, she first claimed she didn't know what had gone on that night, but later admitted she knew her daughter wanted to kill her ex and that she drove Hovanec and her boyfriend to the burial site. Amanda Hovanec was sentenced to 40 years in prison for Timothy's murder and also ordered to pay more than $2 million in restitution for her children's future care. Anita Green was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 2 years of supervised release after pleading guilty to being an accessory to the crimes committed by Hovanec and Thedorou. Meanwhile, Thedorou's sentencing date was pushed back a few days, but he's also expected to be sentenced to many years behind bars. We cover a lot of horrific and tragic stories here at Law&Crime, but what keeps us bringing you these types of stories is in part due to our great sponsors. And so for all the business owners and those who want to start a business or a side hustle, listen up, because I'm going to introduce you to a great platform, and that's Odoo. Odoo is a free all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications that helps with the day-to-day of owning a business. So one of my personal favorite Odoo applications is their customer relations or CRM app. With this application, you can easily create quotations to send sales orders to clients in just a few clicks. It automates the process and makes it super simple, and these quotes look clean and professional. So this feature also has an internal notes tool, which helps keep track of every activity through the sales/CRM process so that there's transparency and clarity for your team members as well as yourself. So again, we want to thank Odoo for sponsoring Sidebar and giving us access to their platform. And right now you can click our link, www.odoo.com/sidebar, and try Odoo now for free. Now, we have a lot to break down, so I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney Diane Menashe. Diane, thank you so much for joining us today. We do cover a lot of crazy poisoning cases here at Law&Crime. In your opinion, what are your thoughts on the length that Amanda Hovanec went to kill her husband? He was injected with M99, which is used for animals in zoos and wildlife.
And, I think what lends to it being so crazy, if you will, is just the number of individuals that were involved in this, right? And while they were family members, there was obviously her, significant other from South Africa that they're saying was the one that actually brought the drug over or obtained the drug for her. And then there was her mother, Anita Green, that helped her not only, take the children into the house when she, committed the crimes that she did, but then also helped her dispose of the body afterwards. So it certainly adds to the uniqueness of this fact pattern, let alone, as you just said, the drug that was used, the poison, if you will, is pretty rare, not something we often see in criminal cases.
And given all these different layers to this case, are you surprised that she only got 40 years in prison?
40, she's 30-ish years. I think she's high 30s. And 40 years in federal prison, there is 85% good time credit, so she won't have to do the full 40. But that said, as I understand the facts of this case, and I've kind of tracked it since it first bore its head a few years ago, she came in early and often about her role. She accepted responsibility quickly, albeit, pretty gross and horrific conduct. So certainly on the federal side, that is taken into account. I also, as I see the plea, she didn't plead to a murder. She pled to a number of other offenses. So I think her guideline calculations probably put her around that 40. So it wasn't entirely surprised, though I think some on the outside might think that's not enough time for the facts of this case. But in the federal system, I do think it made sense when I saw that number yesterday.
And to me, I always feel like poisoning cases are such a personal crime, but I always think there's also that little tidbit that I think sometimes when defendants do or allegedly do these poisoning cases, that they kind of think in their mind they may get away with it. Do you think in Hovanec's mind she thought maybe she could get away with it and get off scot-free?
Well, it sure seems that way. I mean, as the facts read, and as when we can suppose from getting that drug over into the United States for her to use, this planning of the murder, cooperators, and she herself has admitted to, went on for a year's period of time. So one would think in that year's period of time, if you're still planning it, there must be a component where you think you are actually going to get away with it. I think the other thing that is just incredibly, why this case is made for TV, if you will, is but for the fact that his car had a dash cam, what really happened would literally never have been known. So that's just a fact that makes this case, utterly unique as well.
And even though she pleaded out, how important was the evidence in this case, especially that video footage where the victim can be heard saying, "What the heck are you doing? Did you assault me? Get away from me"? How important was that video evidence and how crucial was it to the case?
Well, I think particularly not just hearing on video him saying that, but also there is on video her actually pulling his shirt and swatting his cell phone away. So I think any argument that she could have potentially raised that she wasn't the one that actually injected the poisoning was certainly negated by that dash cam video when he's trying to call 911 for help, and she literally prevents him from doing so. So it seems to me that but for the dash cam video, it would have just been, she's the only person out there. So critical, to say the least.
And what are your thoughts on the motive in this case? Do you think it was really just kind of over custody, or do you think it was just that added aspect? She wanted a divorce from the victim. What are your thoughts on just kind of the why in this case?
It's hard to know because the why would presume that there's someone that's thinking rationally here. And I think, the facts of the case speak to the fact that she wasn't, thinking rationally. But it does seem like this is a custody situation. She had moved on, if you will. She had a new partner who's obviously also her co-defendant. But, the court had just ruled that her ex was to get a significant chunk of uninterrupted time with the children. And that seems to have been really the impetus for the situation that unfortunately unfolded here.
And in your opinion, had this case gone to trial, what kind of avenues do you think that the criminal defense could have explored? And do you think it would have been difficult to defend her as a client?
I mean, definitely difficult to defend her, sort of in any of these cases. We know that her mom got a sentence of 10 years. She was a cooperator, which helps to explain and give some color and context to that 10-year sentence, despite her involvement. So this is a case that would have had, co-cooperators, making statements against her. Also, again, the body cam is just so damaging. So certainly a difficult case to try. And fortunately, for her attorney, she accepted responsibility early and they didn't find themselves in trial.
And also, given that, do you think had this case gone into trial and she was convicted by a jury, she would have gotten a longer sentence?
Certainly. And the federal system, as you know, is different from the state system in terms of penalties, but you get credit for accepting responsibility when you take a plea in federal court. And by definition, when you go to trial, you don't get that credit. So just that alone would have made a difference of a number of years. Plus, I think she would have been convicted of other offenses, including the straight out murder. So she definitely saved some exposure, and with 40 years good time credit, although she's in her 30s, she could potentially live long enough to be released one day.
And what about her lover, as we shall call him? What are your thoughts on kind of his role in this case as well, too?
I'd be interested to know if it's still her lover, but to see if they've survived these rocky waters. But it's my understanding he's being sentenced today. I do think that, or based on what I've read, he also was a cooperator, so I anticipate him getting a reduced sentence as well, at least less than the 40. But, he was an integral part, because it seems like, but for him, the M99 would not have been able to, to be brought in, and then ultimately she used that drug to poison her ex-husband. So he's pretty key in the chain of events here.
And if you had a crystal ball, what would you think his sentence, and what do you think the appropriate sentence would be for him, given the extent of his involvement in this case?
I think assuming that he has been cooperating with the government and he was willing to testify against her, certainly what one could say is he should, and one would anticipate, get a sentence less than 40 years, particularly since she was the principal offender, if you will. That said, I would expect he would get a sentence in between that sort of 10-year of where mom got and 40, probably in excess of 20, but one would expect less than 40.
And my final question to you is, what are your thoughts on how the children kind of feel going throughout all of this? I mean, I just can't even imagine, you know, your mom is accused of doing something or now pleaded guilty to doing something so horrific to their dad. What are your thoughts on just how the children are feeling throughout all of this?
You know, when you have these cases, you think of the trauma that children experience, particularly young children like this, when, you know, one of their parents is killed and then immediately the other parent is incarcerated. You know, and so then that is also, parent is absent from their life. And then their grandmother too, for some period of time before posting bond, was incarcerated. It's just so much trauma. And really there's that absence of, you know, of any parental role model or figure for those children. I don't think we can put words on what a difficult time I'm sure this was and is and will be forever for those children. You know, it's really, really tragic.
Criminal defense attorney Diane Menashe, I really appreciate your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, anything else you'd like to add?
Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
Well, that does it for this episode of Sidebar. You can check out more episodes and subscribe to us anywhere you listen to your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. I'm Elizabeth Millner in for Jesse Weber, and this has been Sidebar presented by Law&Crime.